come to the last lesson in this course. So as you've worked through the course, you've built some apps, you've learned how to build your Android apps, and then the next thing that you need to do is to publish it on Google Play. So first of all, I'm going to talk about how to prepare your app, and there are quite a few things you need to look out for, and then how to publish. So these are the steps for publishing your app, and we're going to discuss each of these in detail. First question is, what is an APK? So an APK is a single file that contains your app, and users need to have your app on their device to run your app. So it's basically like the executable, right? So as you were developing your project, you had Android Studio, you had your project, it has all these folders, it has these files, it has a res layout, it has a lot of different things in it, but you have to compile all of that into a single file, the APK file, to publish it on Google Play. So while you're developing your app, you probably want to share it with other people to get their feedback, maybe to show it to your manager, to show it to other people, share it with your team. And there's various ways of doing that. So one of them is simply to zip up the Android Studio project. And actually, as we were developing this course, that's what we did with the solution code. As we were developing different versions of the solution code, we simply zipped up each project, put it up on Google Drive, and then shared it with the rest of the team. And then to run the app, all you have to do is download the zip, import it into Android Studio, and run it. So you can also share the source code with your fellow developers. You can publish source code on GitHub if you want to. And you can also make an APK. There's tools in Android Studio to make the APK, and you can send the APK to other people if you don't want to share your source code with them. You can also share your app with friends and family. Sometimes you're developing an app just for fun or just for your family, so you need to share it with them. Sometimes you want to let them see what you're doing. Maybe as you're even working through this course, you want to share some of your apps with your friends and family. And you can do that through alpha and beta tests. And you do actually have to upload your app to the Google Play Developer Console to do that. I'll talk more about that later on in this lesson. And then the final step, your app is ready. It's ready to publish, share with the world. And in this case, you publish it on Google Play. You need to make the APK. You upload it to the Google Play Developer Console. You need to run your alpha and beta tests just to make sure it's working like you want it to. And then you publish it. Now I'm going to talk about preparing your app for release. There's various steps in this process, and I'm going to go through each one of these. The first thing is test your app. Make sure it does what it's supposed to do. Make sure you have other people test it, because as you're developing it, like if you're the only developer and it's your app, as you created it, you know what your app is supposed to do. So when you're testing it, you test it in the way that you intend it to be used, but other people may try and use it differently. They may click on different buttons. They may put in entries into the text fields that you never thought of entering. They may try it in different ways that you didn't have in mind and that your app doesn't handle. So make sure other people use your app and they try it in ways that are different to how you would try it. Also, you want to make sure that you test your app on different kinds of devices, older devices, different size devices, and you can do a lot of that in the emulator. And I encourage you to use the support library wherever possible so that your app is as backwards compatible as possible and will run on older devices. So just to, test, really test it. Don't skip this, don't skip this step. Google has this really cool facility that you can use. We talked about it in the Firebase lesson, but in Firebase there's this thing called the Firebase Cloud Test Lab, which is real devices, real tablets, phones, in a data center. They're actual physical devices that live in a Google data center, and you can run your apps on those devices. And you do that through the Firebase Cloud Console. So one of the requirements that you must do is you must add a launcher icon for your app. So this icon is a visual representation of your app. It shows up in Google Play in the store listing. So when the users search for your app on Google Play, they'll see the icon. And then after they've downloaded it, the icon shows up on their home screen, their Manage Applications, My Downloads. There are rules and design guidelines for creating the launcher icon, and the link in this slide will take you to those design guidelines. Google Play will only show apps that will run on the device that the user is using to search. So for example, if your app requires a fingerprint hardware, then Google Play will only show your app to users who are searching with a device that has the fingerprint hardware. Another example is a camera, but most devices these days have cameras. But if your app requires a camera and the user's device doesn't have a camera, then the user won't be able to find your app on Google Play. So there's different ways that Google Play filters the results. One is on the hardware features of the device. The other is on the API level. So if your app requires a specific API level, then users whose devices are Android versions running below that API level, they won't get to see your app. And then you can also specify things in the manifest, like the support screen and the user's features. There's different ways that you can make sure that your app gets shown in search results on Google Play to the devices that can run your app and that won't be shown on devices that can't run your app. And another way of filtering is that when you upload your app to Google Play, you get to specify which countries your app is available in, and only users in those countries will be able to find your app on Google Play. So I want to talk a little bit about application ID. This can be a little bit confusing, but the application ID is your app's identity, and every app must have a completely unique ID. So when you create your app and you create your APK and it's got an ID and you put it up on Google Play, then it has that ID. Now, if you change the ID in your app and you update the app and you republish it, then that app is now a completely different app. It's a separate app. So users who installed your original app will not be able to update to your new app. They will be able to keep the old app and download the new app. So then they'll have these two different apps running on their phone because the app ID uniquely identifies the app. As you work through the course, there were times when you needed to copy an existing project and use that to create your new project. So you basically created a new project by copying the existing project. But in the new project, you needed to go in and change the application ID in build.gradle because you're creating a new application. It needs a new application ID. But if you think about it, you didn't need to go and change the package of your Java source code. You didn't change the package. You just carried on with the package name as it was. But you set the application ID in build.gradle. So when you first create a project, by default, Android Studio sets the application ID for you, and it sets it to be exactly the same as the package. It needs something that is unique to your app, so it uses the package name. But you can go and change the application ID in build.gradle, and it's totally separate from the package name. I just want to make this clear that the package name and the application ID are actually two completely different, separate things. It's just that the application ID is initially set to the package name. So here's an example of setting the application ID in build.gradle. Just wanted to show you that it's very simple. You simply set it in the default config. And as I already mentioned, the initial value is the package name, but you can change it to as you want. But if you do change it, make sure that you change it to something that is going to be unique across all apps everywhere. So another thing to consider is the min SDK version and the target SDK version. So these two values specify which devices your app can run on. So when you create your Android Studio project, you set these values initially, but you may very well just click the defaults. I take this default and that default. It may be that in the process of developing your app, your Android's released a new version and your target SDK version is now not targeting the latest version, and you want it to target the latest version. So even though these values will already be set in your projects, I encourage you to go back and review them and make sure that they reflect the versions that you really want your app to be able to run on. And this is just looking at the different Android versions. So I need to talk about cleaning up your app. This is something you have to do to get your app ready for launch. It's one of those kind of slightly tedious, slightly boring things, not the most fun thing to do. It's like cleaning the house, but you've got to get rid of the clutter and make your app as clean and as streamlined as possible. And these are the things that you need to do. You need to remove the logging statements, disable debugging, clean up your project directories. If your app actually uses URLs connecting to a web service or something, make sure those URLs are live and real and that they're not pointing to some dummy URL that you used for testing purposes. And then you need to reduce your APK size. So why does APK size matter? Why does it matter if your file is big? You have to think about the fact that users are going to be downloading your app over the network, and if they have an unreliable network or intermittent network, if their devices, if they're on pay-by-the-byte plans, or if they have limited data on their plans, they're not going to want their device to be spending a lot of time downloading your app. So if the app's too big, people may very well just simply not download it to begin with. But also, the size of the app really affects the speed and the performance of the app. So, you do need to pay attention to making your APK size small. And it's not that Android can't it's not that Android can't run the APK no matter what the size. It's just it's going to be slower, it's going to be clunky, it's going to be a frustrating experience for the users if the APK size is too big. So how do you reduce the APK size? How do you make your app small? And a lot of this comes back to the house cleaning. You need to get rid of the clutter. You need to remove things from your project that the app doesn't actually use. And a big one is look at your images and make sure they're as small as they possibly can be. So how do you reduce image size? If you have animated images, reduce the frame rate. You can use drawable objects, and the good thing about drawable objects is that there's the data path. There isn't actually an embedded image that gets saved in the project. There's the data path, and then when Android goes to render it to the screen, it draws the data path. So the actual drawable object itself is very, very much smaller than an image might be. If you use PNGs in your app, crunch them, compress them, make them as small as possible. And there's tools out there to help you crunch and compress your files. If you're using JPEG files, use the lowest quality and size that you can where it still looks good, right? I mean, you don't need like a high def photo quality for a little image on a device, but also don't make it so small that it doesn't look good. And then there's the WebP file format, which is a good format. It's a fairly new format which uses less size. And then vector graphics is similar to the drawable objects. With vector graphics, it's there's a file that defines what the graphic should look like. It's not actually an image. So again, it's a good way of saving space. So coming back to the cleanup, you need to clean up your project folders and files. You need to get rid of things that your app does not use. So this is just looking at some of the folders. There's a source folder which should only have your source code, like your Java files. They live in your source folder. There should never be any jar files inside the source folder. And the lib directory the lib folder contains external libraries, private libraries. Look through those and make sure that the libraries in there are actually libraries that your app needs, because libraries take up space. And if you've used the library, like maybe you used the library and then you found a different way of doing your code, so then you don't need the library anymore, but the library will be in the project, find those libraries and take them out. And the JNI directory contains the source files if you were working with Android NDK. I know we haven't talked about the Android NDK in this course, but it lets you work with C code and stuff, and that's would be in a different course. And we would talk about that in a different time. So just a little bit more about cleaning up, remove any unused data files. I mean, one thing to check is particularly check your layout files, your drawables and your images. As you're developing your app, you may try out different layouts, create different layouts, and then in the end, at the very end, it may be that you have layout files that your app doesn't actually need. Another thing you can do is that you can reuse layout. So if you have 4 different views that each use a similar layout, you could probably have one layout that's used by those 4 different views. They don't all have to have their own individual layout file. Okay, now it's time to talk about actually generating the APK, generating this file that will represent your app and that you can put up on Google Play. So apps must be signed. They actually have to have a signature that shows that this app belongs to you, this app was created by you. And Android Studio has the tools for generating the APK and signing the APK. So you don't need to worry too much about this. You just need to know that you do need to digitally sign it, and you can do it in Android Studio. So apps get signed with a digital certificate, and a digital certificate contains a public key and a private key. And the public key goes with your app, and you get the private key. And it's up to you to store the private key and keep it safe. You will need it again if you want to update the app again, if you want to upload the app again. When Android Studio signs the app, it creates a public certificate and the private key. It attaches the public part to the APK, and you get to store the private part. You get to store the private key. So why do you need to sign your app? You need to sign it because it identifies this app as belonging to you, and when you go to update your app in the future, it gets signed with the same key so that Google Play knows this app really came from you. And this prevents other developers, other people from uploading an app and claiming that it came from you. So it's for your safety. All right, let's talk about publishing to Google Play now. All right, that was a lot of work getting your app ready, but let's talk about publishing to Google Play now. So when your app's ready, publish it on Google Play. And once it's actually up in the public part of Google Play, users can search for it, they can download it, they can review it. Let me repeat that again. They can review it. Make sure your app is ready before you make it public in Google Play. It's funny how people like to give bad reviews much more than they like to give good reviews. So if there's something about your app that they don't like, they're going to give you a bad review. If they love your app, they may or may not give you a review, right? I mean, think about it yourself. How many reviews have you given on Google Play? Did you give it for apps you liked or for apps that you had some complaints about? And kind of an interesting thing is the more people like your app, the more they use it, the more they think, oh, I wish it did this. So you will find you get feedback, people wanting more features. So that's actually a good sign. It means that they're using your app. Be open to it, read what people write, listen to the feedback. So here are the steps for publishing. First, you have to create an account on the Google Play Developer Console if you don't already have one. Then you need to create an entry for your app. Then you need to add the required assets and information. There's quite a few things that you need to specify for your app. Then you can run alpha and beta tests. You can also run pre-launch reports, which use Firebase Cloud Test Lab. And then when you're ready, you publish to the world. So the Google Play Developer Console, you go to play.google.com/app/publish. There's a process that you have to go through. You accept the agreement, you pay the registration fee, you enter your details. Now note, you do have to pay. So at the point at which you're ready to get an account on the Google Play Developer Console, you do have to pay a fee. Now we don't have a practical in this course for putting your app up on Google Play. We didn't want to make you all have to pay this registration fee, and also maybe your apps aren't quite ready for publishing yet. But when your apps are ready for publishing, you will need to be prepared to pay this fee. So you get into Google Play Developer Console, you accept the terms, enter some details about your name, your address, if you have a website, a few things. It's nothing too much here. And then you're actually in the console. So now you have an account, and what you do next is you create entries for each of the apps that you want to run in Google Play. So you add an application by clicking the Add an Application button, of course. And then after you've added the application, you have a choice. You can either go ahead and upload the APK, or you can just prepare the store listing. So you can get ready for uploading your APK. So if you want to run alpha and beta tests, you do that in the Google Play Developer Console. And there's tabs. There's tabs for beta testing and alpha testing. It's actually very easy. You just click the alpha testing tab. Let's say you want to run an alpha test, and then you can upload your APK. You can actually drag and drop it right there into the developer console. But why do you want to run alpha and beta tests? This is your last chance to test your app before you unleash it in the wild to everybody. It's a really great opportunity to share your app with a small set of users. You can get feedback from them, and you can act on the feedback before you go public with your app. So it's a really good opportunity to get the bugs out and to share your app with a limited set of people. The other thing to note is that the feedback that you get from your alpha and beta testers does not show up in your Google Play listing. So if you release your app and it turns out it's got some bug that you hadn't possibly imagined, but it's really quite a bad bug, your users will give you this feedback on this bad bug. You can fix that, and then all that feedback will never be visible to other people in Google Play. So it's a safe environment for you to get your app tested. So what's the difference between alpha and beta? So generally speaking, alpha tests are something you would run during development. They're kind of fairly early tests. Sometimes they're experimental versions. It's not the fully baked, fully functional product. It's just, you want to get some early testing. And then beta testing is testing where you think your product's pretty close. You just want final testing before you go public with it. So the difference between alpha and beta is kind of the stability of the app. So while you're running your alpha and beta tests, obviously your testers can find your app in Google Play, but it's not listed in Google Play, so it doesn't show up in the catalog. People who just come and browse in Google Play can't find it. So you must give a link to your testers to use it. And like I already said, the feedback that the testers give you don't show up in your listing when you do publish your app. So there's closed betas and there's open betas. And the main difference is that a closed beta, people have to be invited to join. So for a closed beta, you can have like a list of emails, or you can have a CSV file with the emails. There could be a Google community or Google group, and members of that are allowed to access your beta. And an open beta is actually anybody who knows where to find your app can join the beta. So you can get testing by a larger group of people. And you can, if you want, limit the number of testers. So even though it's an open beta, you can set a limit to the number of testers. So let's say you only want 50 testers, then you could set the limit to 50. So then you don't get, 5,000 people trying your app out and giving you feedback, when you can really only handle feedback from 50 people. But in this way, you don't have to, if you use an open beta, you don't have to carefully manage exactly who is allowed access to your beta. You just create the link, and then people share the link with whoever you want. You could post it somewhere, post it on Facebook, and then people can click the link and join your beta. So the whole point of running tests, alpha and beta tests, is to find the bugs and make your app better. So you do need to get feedback from your testers. So for closed tests, you need to provide a way for users to give you your feedback. Do you want them to send you email? Is there a website they can go to? Is there a message forum? So make sure that your testers know how to give you feedback. So for open tests, you can read the feedback in the developer console. You can reply to it. And again, I know I already said this a few times, but the feedback that you get from your alpha and beta testers does not show up in your Google Play listing when you go public with your app. So a pre-launch report, what you can do. So let's talk about pre-launch reports. And these actually use the Firebase Cloud Test Lab. But basically, you can get an automatically generated report about your app. So after you upload the APK, you can ask for a pre-launch report. Then your app is automatically run on the devices in the Firebase Cloud Test Lab. And the test actually does, you don't have to specify requirements for the test. The test will test your app. Things like typing, tapping, swiping will actually test the features in your app for you. And then you get the results of the report. So these are just some examples of the reports that the pre-launch testing gives you. So you don't get the pre-launch reports automatically to begin with. what you have to do is you have to opt in. You just basically opt in. There's a button that you click that says, yes, I want the pre-launch report. Then after you upload an app, the pre-launch tests are automatically run. So I do need to talk a little bit about the criteria for publishing. I think by now you've probably got the picture that your app has to be well tested, high quality, has to implement all the required functionality. You can't have activities with buttons and then you click the button and the button does nothing. The app has to be have good performance, has to be stable, robust, not crash all the time. And there are actually specific guidelines to follow. And you can follow that link to get the actual guidelines. So another thing I need to talk about is the Google Play policies. So Google Play has some policies around what your app is and isn't allowed to do. So it's not just about your app being fully functional, running fast. Your app has to play nice with other apps. And Google Play wants to be a safe place for users to go to get their apps, for apps to live with other apps. The whole idea around the Google Play policies is to make sure that Google Play is a safe experience for everybody. And I'm not going to go into all the policies in detail, but we'll look at one of them so you get the picture of what these policies are like. So there is a policy around the actual content of your app. There's some kind of behavior and some kind of content that is forbidden in apps on Google Play. So you're not allowed an app that incites violence or bullies in any way. The sensitive events means you're not allowed to have an app that takes advantage of a sensitive event. So for example, for natural disasters, it's great if your app will help people, if they will help them locate resources or help rescuers find people, but you don't want to have an app that takes advantage of a natural disaster like a big earthquake. Another one that's actually not allowed on Google Play is gambling. You're not allowed to put gambling apps on Google Play. Now, some parts of the world, gambling is okay, it's legal. Some parts of the world, it's illegal. That doesn't matter. You're not allowed to have gambling apps on Google Play. Interestingly enough, though, you are allowed to show ads that promote gambling, but only in places where gambling is allowed. So there's also policies around ads, and you can investigate that more on your own. And then obviously your app is not allowed to do anything that is illegal in the countries where it will be running. But as you can see, these policies are all designed around having apps that are safe for users. Okay, now you're ready to publish to the world. You've run your alpha test, you've run your beta test, you've done all the testing you can possibly think of. Your testers are all giving you good feedback. You're ready to go. So you upload your APK to production. Okay, so now you're ready to publish, but you can't because there's some things missing. So there are some things that you do require. You need to add a high resolution icon. We already talked about the launcher icon for your app. You do need to have a feature graphic. You're highly recommended to have a feature graphic. And what this means is that if you are lucky enough that Google Play picks your app as a featured app and it's going to be displayed in the Google Play catalog, as a featured app, then there needs to be a graphic for the Google Play Store to use. You need to add 2 non-Android TV screenshots, select a category, select a content rating, Okay, there's a lot of things you need to do, and you might be thinking, how am I going to remember all this? Right there in the Google Play Developer Console, there's this little link. Why can't I publish? You click that, and it'll tell you all the things that are missing. So when you do satisfy everything and you're ready to publish to the world, then you submit it, and Google does check your app. There's some automatic checking that happens to make sure that you've met all those requirements. And then there's also some manual checking that, people may or may not manually review your app. For example, for some of the compliance policies, the only way we detect violations is by manual checking. So your app can be rejected for violating any of the requirements. And sometimes this will be a very small technical thing. Maybe your app launcher icon was too big or something. Don't just give up oh my goodness, I can't publish my app. No, find out why it was rejected, fix the problem, and try again. Okay, that brings us to the end of not only this lesson, but to the end of the course. And like I said, there isn't actually a practical for this lesson, but hopefully you'll have a great idea for an app, you'll build your own app, and you will go out and publish it on Google Play. Thank you.